Hello, I'm Chuck Black, and this is the Age of Ingenuity, our weekly chronicle of Canada's current innovation economy. And we've got some good stories this week. We're making plans to go back to work and reopen the country, but all is not totally well. For example, the Canadian Journalism Foundation, the CBC's Anna Tremonti, and the Globe and Mail's Asian correspondent, Nathan Vanderclip, each think that we need to look to China and its use of controversial digital surveillance tools in order to gain insight into what Canadians might expect to occur once our current pandemic restrictions are lifted.
And I'm Alan Calder, and I just spent the morning posting liberal-centric online Twitter and Facebook messages to see if I can raise my social media score enough to be allowed to travel to my parents' cottage in Gananoque for the weekend. I'm very much in favor of all recent federal government activities relating to new financing programs and small business and innovation, especially adore our Prime Minister's new beard.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Orlotti, and I don't have a beard or a cottage I want to visit during the lockdown. But I do think that innovation benefits from a distributed environment where more people, not just VIPs, can travel whenever they want, and the government isn't quite so intent on picking the next set of economic winners. With that said and done, here are a few of the stories we're currently tracking. And our first piece is from the National Post, titled "Where We Stand in Canada, Reopenings by Province and Territory from Coronavirus Lockdown" by Bianca Barti. As Canada tries to contain the novel coronavirus, some provinces are preparing plans to reopen their economies. And this information is paralleled in a post from CTV News titled "Ontario Unveils Steps to Reopen. Here's What the New Normal Will Look Like" by Kayla Goodfield. Ontario has unveiled its three-phase plan to reopen following weeks of shutdown due to the spread of COVID-19. While no specific dates have been offered up by provincial officials, the plan, dubbed "A Framework for Reopening Our Province," states the parameters of each gradual stage.
So what we've got here is no hard date to reopen in Ontario, but Quebec, Ontario, and Saskatchewan have the most detailed reopening plans. And the Ontario plan focuses around medical progress, not economic requirements, and there's no hard dates. Is that a fair assessment of what these articles are talking about?
It is, and I do agree that that science must be the primary determinant of when we open. That's simply my point of view, and of course we have to keep in mind the economic impact, but science has to trump politics in this case.
Well, science has not been carrying the COVID virus to us, has it though? Like, science has not been carrying the flag of COVID. Doctors have been shut down from telling the stories that we know it's not working. It does not work preventing COVID spread. It's just, no doctor would say that. They don't teach this in medical school. It doesn't work. The herd immunity is what they teach in medical schools, but we don't get to hear that on YouTube, as it's been silenced though, this kind of talk. That's my big thing, to be honest, is that while we're going to have sort of a truth and reconciliation committee after this, I want to find out what happened and why these billions and billions and billions of dollars are being spent on, and why they did it for the shittiest reason they can imagine. It's the flu, and they don't care. They don't want to talk about it, so they silence the debate, and then they spend all of our money. That's how I see this going down, to be honest.
I would tend to agree that I've seen social media articles for YouTube and for Facebook that argues that they're going to delete any posts that don't come into compliance with the World Health Organization rules and regulations. This strikes me as being kind of a bad idea. I mean, you can't do due diligence, you can't do peer review unless you have contrary opinions. I also can't help but notice an article that went up on YouTube and went up on Facebook. It was an interview with two healthcare professionals in the United States, and they were arguing that the reactions to the pandemic had actually been exactly the opposite to what they learned to do in school. Their logic was that you were supposed to quarantine the infected, not quarantine the healthy. And to be fair, Winston Churchill, one of my heroes, once a very long time ago, he said, experts ought to be on tap and not on top. I would suggest we go on to something we can at least all agree with. We are following in the US's footsteps by bringing manufacturing online first. And I'd like to reference the April 29, 2020 Wings post, Bombardier to gradually resume manufacturing in Canada. I would argue that the article focuses around manufacturing, especially automotive and aerospace, and those short-term contracts that have benefited them, a series of government purchases for domestically produced medical products and devices that tied them over until the economy opens up.
Bombardier's been given lots of money by the government, piles of it. So that's my comment.
Agreed. What do you think, Brian?
I agree with Al that far too much Canadian taxpayer money has been, forgive me, flushed down the drain, especially by the corrupt and incompetent managers at Bombardier. And as hesitant as I am for the government to write them any checks anymore, I do feel for the workers being affected. And if this allows them to keep working and supporting their families, then I can get behind it, at least for the short term.
But Bombardier, though, is one of those projects by the government that say we can't handle the industry, so we'll find a big player and give them all the money and just hope that it'll trickle down to other players. It doesn't, but that's what we'll say in public.
Well, that would have been fine if Bombardier wasn't run by another family clique, and firing tens of thousands of people while approving their own pay raises.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Bombardier's, I think we can agree that Bombardier is the worst person to lead us out of COVID.
Again, I agree, but I'm also thinking of the workers and their families, especially in times like this.
Me too. I don't care about Bombardier at all, but the people who work there, that's all I care about too. I'm serious then.
How about that's fair? I would argue that a case could be made that SNC Lavalin is pretty bad too.
They're publicly bad, but nothing happened to them either. Don't worry, they're just a corporation. They can do whatever they want, Chuck. Luckily,
okay.
Right?
Wow, you guys are an aggressive bunch this morning.
Go fuck yourself, Chuck. You know what you're talking about. Just kidding.
It's like when I hear Bombardier, like the bile comes to the tip of my tongue.
And our next story drives passion in me as much as the last story drove passion in you guys. It's the May 8th, 2020 Canadian Journalism Foundation online seminar on Beyond Quarantine, The View from Beijing. This is an online meeting from the Canadian Journalism Foundation. It includes CBC's Anna Tremonte and the Globe and Mail's Asian correspondent, Nathan Vandercliffe. And it's talking about how we need to look to China to figure out what's going to happen in Canada after the pandemic. All eyes still remain on China, where COVID-19 first emerged. Strict quarantine measures have been relaxed and attempts at resuming regular activities have begun, a bit with the use of controversial tools, such as digital surveillance. From his base in Beijing, Nathan Vanderkip, Asian correspondent for the Globe and Mail, shares his perspective on the pandemic's outbreak and the issues arising from this new post-lockdown life, including insights into what Canadians might expect once their current restrictions are lifted. And he's talking with Anna Marie Tremonte, and they expect Canada to go down the route that China has gone down, maybe becoming a nicer, more wonderful China, but definitely they're expecting the tools that have been developed in China to be rolled out here, the social media testing, the tracking to make sure you stay in the right area and make sure you don't infect other people. And I actually don't like it. Minister Baines has discussed this possibility with others as outlined in the Logic post. I believe that's an April 30th, 2020 Logic post. Its title is Palantir's McNaughton, has engaged with many in federal government, according to Minister Baines. And the lead is Innovation Minister Navdeep Baines says he is in frequent contact with Palantir Canada President David McNaughton, but did not say whether McNaughton or his company has worked with the federal government on the COVID-19 pandemic. So what do you guys think about that?
Well, I mean, worship is the wrong word, but certainly the West has adopted several of China's tactics in dealing with the outbreak. I mean, in Italy, we've seen the extensive use of drones with thermal imaging to track people's movements. I don't believe the Chinese have been using loudspeakers to hurl profanity at their citizens to stay indoors, but we've seen some of the use of their tactics: lockdowns, physical lockdowns, use of drones. I'm not sure about social media monitoring, if that's been done in Italy or other places. It's always the slippery slope that leads to the fiery pit, but some of it, I believe, can be useful and is justifiable. The use of, particularly in Italy, where population density in the cities is so dense and you have multi-generational households, and the risk of infection and its consequences are very high, potentially wiping out families, potentially. But yes, it's always the slippery slope. And just as an aside, the company here, Palantir, I believe is the same company that makes the software used by the U.S. Department of Immigration Naturalization to hunt down illegal Mexican immigrants.
I think you're correct about that. I think you're correct. Al, what do you think?
I think that the industrious Minister Baines has got some friends that are too expensive for us. Honestly, we don't need to track us. Why is he talking to these people? Like, it doesn't work. Why don't we talk to doctors? Why don't we talk to doctors who say this is not going to work and find out about it? Instead, we talk to people who have expensive solutions for us that don't work. That's the government I think of.
Because money has to be made by somebody.
Oh, perfect. And, so then I guess COVID doesn't have to be stopped then. And our rights don't have to be lived out. This is just about to take our rights away. If it solves the problem, great. If there was a problem, great. The problem is it's not a problem like they say it is, and they'll keep going this shit until we don't let them. This stuff for me is like 100% at the core of why we do have a constitution, because they're taking everything away and doing what they want, and we can't do a damn thing about it. And then everyone's on board with it because the fear guides people, and they convince us we're afraid. We're all going to get COVID. Look at the numbers. The death rate has almost gone, markedly down in Canada. But outside of that, it's very dangerous.
And those are the stories we're covering this week. As always, the articles we've referenced are listed in the show notes below. Keep in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Minds, and Gab.
If you'd like to promote your event or your activity, or if you think you have insight into Canada's current innovation economy, please send me an email. I'm at chuck.black@protonmail.com.
And we're currently on YouTube, BitChute, Vimeo, and hope to be on other platforms soon. If you want to support our program, we're on Patreon. And if you want to sponsor us, send an email to Chuck, as he mentioned, at the address that he said.
And that's all for this week. We'll be back next week with more stories covering our current age of ingenuity.